It is with the greatest possible pleasure that I rise to support the bill put forward by the noble Lord Chinquin. It's a significant step forward in logical thinking and in the investigation of what we as a society feel about handicapped people, about life ownership, and about who should have the judgment over whether a person should live or die. There is, in fact, if you look internationally, the widest possible variation on the topic in issue, as indeed it is with capital punishment. And curiously, that is exactly what this is. It is a form of capital punishment. It is a form of disallowing of life by decree of someone who is not the person in question. I am aware immediately that in United Kingdom law, of course, a fetus has no personality. This is not the same with some of our EU member state partners. If you look at Germany, for example, where the fetus has a right to life, as it were, has a personality from the moment of conception. Even there, in Germany, a mother, a would-be mother, a pregnant lady, can have an abortion any time up to 12 weeks with nothing except a consultation with a medical professional and 3 days of waiting time. But after 12 weeks, nothing is allowed unless the health of the mother is severely compromised. And if I recall correctly, earlier legislation, considerably earlier legislation in the United Kingdom, gave the health of the mother as the key to the question as to whether or not there should be an abortion on any grounds at all. And it seems to me that we switched considerably when it was in fact deemed that external judgments, including that of the mother, but mainly of medical professionals, on the health of the fetus itself became the judgmental point, rather than the health of the mother. But major and minor handicap is a difficult issue to determine. But as Lord Chinquin, as the noble Lord Alton has already declared and pointed out, that some of the handicaps that are deemed to be major, perhaps they were major once. They're certainly not major today, because there has been medical advance. There have been ways in which they can be either ameliorated or altered or the person adequately supported. If you look, for example, at mental handicap, and you look at some of the ways in which mental handicap has been supported with special assistance in schools, for example, maybe 100 years ago it wasn't possible for someone with a certain level of intelligence to be educated and to have a fulfilling life. And now with special teaching, special assistance, and the attitude of society towards children with mental handicap, it is amazing how flourishing later on those children and adults can become. I myself feel very powerfully that this particular focus on Down syndrome as an impossible handicap and something that therefore should be discarded, and the person with the handicap should go as well. I find that intolerable. But on the other hand, I would have great difficulty in supporting the birth, if known, of a fetus with Tay-Sachs disease, when in fact the pain and grief and suffering is eliminated after about 2.5 years, but the time up to those 2.5 is agony for the baby, and of course is very, very, very difficult indeed for the child. So one has to think about what is the major issue that we are looking at with Lord Chinquin's bill. And he has based his argument on equality and on equal opportunity. I would like to think for a moment about the fact that everyone who is disabled is just as important and valuable as anyone else. I speak also as someone who happens to be profoundly disabled from an in utero problem. I would very much have avoided being discarded before birth if I had had any opportunity to comment on that. But the problem that we are discussing is that we're making judgments on another potential human being who is not there to make the judgments themselves. And I think that the attitude of society towards the mother as well is a critical issue. And perhaps we're guilty of hypocrisy here, because we claim we have a wonderful attitude towards those who are disabled, absolutely perfect. Didn't we do the Paralympics? Weren't we number one? Weren't we just special British people with handicapped Paralympic brilliance? And yet today, here we are, discussing, at the very moment almost of birth, the discarding of a potentially valuable human being who might go on to win a gold medal in the Paralympics. Isn't there a hypocrisy here my noble lords, that really does need significantly to be addressed and discussed. This is why I'm such a keen supporter of Lord Chincrin's bill, because he's tackling that very hypocrisy. On the one hand, we're very proud of ourselves. Indeed, this House recently published a report on disability. I have to question whether this House is actually fulfilling the goals and the activities of that disability report, which was welcomed and lauded and supposed to be so wonderful. Are we doing it? My noble peers, I suggest that we are not, in fact. And I think it's time we woke up to the fact that we are hypocrites on disability. This is a very, very clear example. Not just the House of Lords report, which I'm perhaps criticising a little bit in terms of its implementation here, because it doesn't happen, but really the great hypocrisy of saying that we, the British, were special on handicap, we're in advance of everybody else. Here we are with all the Paralympics. Those poor old Brazilians, they couldn't meet us, not one tiny scrap. And yet, actually, we're making sure we have the fewest possible supposedly disabled citizens in our society. If we look at some of our EU member states or across the globe, you will find this vast disparity of views. So I don't suggest, my noble lords, that this is a topic that is very easy to discuss, or one on which it's very easy to reach a solution. But what I ask is that we should at least be honest with ourselves. And instead of suggesting that we've got the Perfect Equalities Act, we're absolutely wonderful, that we're doing everything for the disabled, yet on the other hand, we're allowing ourselves to discard all disabled people before they're actually born, I think we do need to have a very, very careful look at what the quality of life is in terms of those who are disabled, and ask the disabled people themselves why it is they find life so happy, so exciting, so worth having, and would still to be here. I was interested the other day to attend a round table for several of the most important disabled societies in the UK, and disability was being discussed, disabled people were being discussed. And rather the same attitude prevailed. As I looked around the table, I could find only one person in that vast discussion room was actually disabled. And I speak here as someone who chaired and ran for about a decade or so, ADAPT, the Access for Disabled People to Arts Premises and Public Libraries, and we were a responsible body for adapting, to a certain extent, the House of Commons, and to a lesser extent, sadly, their noble lordships' house, the House of Lords. So, going around the UK, getting Grade 1, Grade 2 listed buildings adapted, was a tremendous experience, and I was so glad that we managed to do so much. But it was very interesting indeed that the disabled, even today, are talked about, but are not the ones who are giving the evidence. It is with the greatest possible pleasure that I hope my few remarks will convince the noble lords that this bill deserves not just full support, but a wholehearted, wide, society discussion, because this is our hypocrisy, and it's something that we in the noble lords can very well address and can resolve.